Now we need to multiply fractions. So first we have 1/3 times 1/3. What we can do to multiply fractions is just multiply the numerators, multiply the denominators, and we have our answer. So 1 times 1 is 1, 3 times 3 is 9, so our answer is 1/9. Now we have 3/5 times 1/4. So 3 times 1 is 3, 5 times 4 is 20, so our answer is 3/20. And finally, we have 7/10 times 1/2. 7 times 1 is 7, 10 times 2 is 20, so our answer is 7/20. Let's take another look at this first question. 1/3 times 1/3 is 1/9. That might be confusing because if you know that the larger the denominator, the smaller the fraction, you'll notice that multiplying by a fraction gives us a fraction that's smaller than what we started with. Now multiplication doesn't always make things bigger. Multiplication only makes things bigger if we're multiplying by a number larger than 1. If we're multiplying by 1, it stays the same, and if we're multiplying by something that's less than 1, our answer will be smaller. So for 1/3 times 1/3, what we're really doing is taking 1/3, but times a third means that we only want 1/3 as much. So if we only have 1/3 of what we started with in red, you can see that of the whole fraction bar, we now have 9 pieces and 1 piece in red, so that's why our answer is 1/9. Next, we had 3/5, so we can show 3 parts out of 5 on our fraction bar, and multiplying by a quarter means we only want 1/4 as much as 3/5. So if we split each of those 3/5 into quarters, then you can see that the whole fraction bar is now split into 20 pieces, so that's the denominator, and we have 3 pieces in red, so that's our numerator. Finally, we had 7/10 times 1/2. So we can show 7/10 on our fraction bar, and times 1/2 means we only want half as much as 7/10. So if we split our 7/10 in half, you can see that our fraction bar is now split into 20 pieces altogether, and we have 7 of those pieces in red, so our answer is 7/20. So multiplying by a fraction will make a number smaller, and all you need to do is multiply the numerators, multiply the denominators, and you have your answer. Now we have 2/3 times 2/3. So we're multiplying 2 fractions together, and the way we do that is just to multiply the numerators. So 2 times 2 is 4, so that's our numerator, and then we multiply the denominators. So 3 times 3 is 9, so that's our denominator. So our answer is 4/9. Now we have 3/5 times 3/4. So again, we just multiply the numerators. 3 times 3 is 9, multiply the denominators. 5 times 4 is 20, so our answer is 9/20. Let's look at this first question again. We had 2/3 times 2/3. So we can show 2/3 of our fraction bar shaded, and times 2/3 means we only want 2/3 as much as 2/3. So if we colour 2/3 of the 2/3 that we have in red, you can see that in our fraction bar we now have 4 red parts, so that's our numerator, but now we have 9 parts altogether, so that's our denominator. Notice here that multiplying by a fraction makes the number smaller. Now multiplication only makes things bigger if we're multiplying by something more than 1. If we're multiplying by 1, the number stays the same, And if we're multiplying by something less than 1, so if we're multiplying by a fraction or a decimal that's less than 1, then our number is going to get smaller, and 4/9 is smaller than 2/3. Then we had 3/5 times 3/4. So we can show 3/5 on our fraction bar, and times 3/4 means we only want 3/4 as much of those 3/5. So we can show 3/4 of the 3/5 in red, and you can see that if we look at all the parts coloured in, if we look at only the parts coloured in, 3/4 of what's coloured in is coloured in red. But look at the whole fraction bar. Our fraction bar as a whole is now split into 20 pieces, so that's our denominator, and we now have 9 of these pieces in red, so that's our numerator. We have 3/4 times 8/9. So to multiply two fractions together, we multiply the numerator, and 3 times 8 is 24. Then we multiply the denominator, and 4 times 9 is 36. So our answer is 24 over 36. But we can simplify that fraction by finding the highest common factor of 24 and 36. Now 24 and 36 are both in the 2 times table, they're both in the 3 times table, the 4 times table, the 6 times table, but the highest common factor of 24 and 36 is 12. So, to express the fraction in its lowest terms, we can divide both the numerator and the denominator by 12. 24 divided by 12 is 2, and 36 divided by 12 is 3. So our answer, in its simplified form, or in its lowest terms, is 2/3. Now we have 7/10 times 5/10. So 7 times 5 is 35, and 10 times 10 is 100. So our answer is 35 over 100. But we can simplify that, because 35 and 100 are both in the 5 times table. They're both multiples of 5. So we can express this fraction in its lowest terms by dividing the numerator and the denominator by 5. 35 divided by 5 is 7, and 100 divided by 5 is 20, because 20 times 5 is 100. So in its lowest terms, our answer is 7/20.